Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville, fiber internet, streaming TV, home security, and automation in southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis, lawmg.com. The IU School of Education, preparing teachers, scholars, and administrators to improve teaching in Indiana and around the world. education.indiana.edu. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. The 2018 midterm election is over, which means campaigning for 2020 is already underway.
We need to get our president reelected. And what we're going to do is we're going to get more people from the real world that have had to do things that can fix things in a dysfunctional system.
There's more than elections in Indiana. We hear from protesters upset over President Trump's firing of Jeff Sessions, ongoing mold problems on IU's campus, and more of the latest headlines from across the state. And we take you inside a state prison where women are getting hands-on training that aims to help them succeed after their release.
For one, it will help you be employed and be able to support yourself financially, and that helps get you over some of the obstacles that you face when you go home.
How it could help them land high-paying jobs in the tech industry. Those stories and more from across the state right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren.
And I'm Barbara Brozier.
Well, across the country this week, Republicans fought back in what some thought would be a blue wave. The GOP added to its edge in the Senate by picking up 3 seats, including Indiana's race between Democratic incumbent Joe Donnelly and Republican Mike Braun. As Barbara Brozier reports, Braun's victory says just as much about him as it does about President Donald Trump.
As voters at the Indiana GOP's election night party watched results come in, the same issue kept coming up.
Caravans moving towards the U.S. border is a big concern, and we need strong borders and strong security on those borders.
I've been down to New Mexico. I've been down to El Paso, Ruidoso, and you see things down there, and that influences me.
When I see all those thousands of people coming our way and getting in illegally and all the things that have happened to us in the past because of the illegal immigrants, that was the biggest one for me.
But how people cast their vote didn't just come down to immigration or any other one issue. Many Republicans say they supported Braun for another reason. He'll support Trump, while Senator Joe Donnelly campaigned on his ability to work across party lines with the president. Some voters say that didn't happen with the most important issues.
When it comes to other really key things, like immigration, like the Kavanaugh, I guess those are the main 2 things, he just doesn't go along with them.
Donnelly says he'll work with Braun to ensure a smooth transition as he takes over the Senate seat.
We love this country so much. We need to make sure we work to bring our country together rather than to divide it, to make sure every American has a chance.
And Braun made it clear his alliance with Trump will continue once he's in Washington, because their success is now intertwined.
We've got 2 years to show that as conservatives, we can make things work. We need to get our president reelected. And what we're going to do is we're going to get more people from the real world that have had to do things that can fix things in a dysfunctional system.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Barbara Brozier. Trey Hollingsworth, the Republican incumbent in the 9th District, held his seat in the House of Representatives after overwhelmingly beating out Democratic opponent Liz Watson. Hollingsworth says he spoke with around 30,000 Hoosiers over the phone ahead of the election to find out what they care about.
What I continue to hear from Hoosiers is they wanted to hear from me directly, right? They wanted to hear me talk about the issues that mattered most to them, but more importantly, for me to listen to them and to make sure that I'm carrying their message back to Washington.
Hollingsworth says he wants to create an environment that works for Indiana and Hoosier values, including term limits and anti-lobbying measures.
And in the 6th District, Greg Pence was able to win the seat formerly occupied by his brother, Vice President Mike Pence. Pence beat Democrat Jeanine Lee Lake. He referenced his time serving in the U.S. Marine Corps, saying he had been called to serve the country once before.
Today I feel that same calling to serve the community and country I love again.
His opponent said she was not impressed with Pence's lack of public presence and media availability during the campaign.
My opponent refused to debate. He refused to come out of the water. He thought the submarine strategy was the best way to go. And, that's sad because I really think that's kind of a cowardly way to go.
The 6th District seat was vacated by Luke Messer, who made an unsuccessful bid for the Republican Party's nomination to run for U.S. Senate.
Indiana elected a trio of Republican women to serve as auditor, treasurer, and secretary of state. Brock Turner has more.
It was a good night for the Republican trio of Tara Klutz, Kelly Mitchell, and Connie Lawson. The three stumped on the campaign trail together and joined fellow Republicans during a watch party on Tuesday. The longest-serving member of the trio is Secretary of State Connie Lawson. The Republican was appointed by then-Governor Mitch Daniels. The position oversees election security, a point of emphasis for her campaign. Her opponents accused Lawson of not doing enough to ensure polls were accessible. She disputed both.
If the General Assembly decides that's something they would like to do, certainly I would support that, but they haven't brought that up. I think, we give Hoosiers ample time to vote. We're open for early voting for 28 days before the election, and we don't shut that off until noon the day before the election.
Tara Klutz was appointed to state auditor after now Lieutenant Governor Suzanne Crouch vacated the position in 2017. She plans to increase transparency and educate voters on how the office serves them. State Auditor Kelly Mitchell plans to follow a similar script. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Brock Turner.
Indiana's 29th was one of the few Indiana districts that turned blue this season. Republican State Senator Mike Delth was defeated by Democratic challenger J.D. Ford. Ford, the first openly gay state senator-elect in Indiana, said he is going to the State House to represent marginalized populations.
You have a voice in the Indiana General Assembly, and I only intend to amplify it.
Ford campaigned on increasing the minimum wage and passing a hate crime law. Indiana is only one of 5 states without a state hate crimes law. This was a rematch race for the two candidates, but this year Ford came out on top.
Voters approved an amendment to the state constitution that requires the legislature to pass balanced budgets. The ballot question asked if the Constitution should require lawmakers pass a balanced budget unless at least 2/3 of both chambers suspend that requirement. Indiana currently bars the legislature from creating debt except to meet casual deficits. The state has had a balanced budget since 1891. The Noblesville School District will be able to collect $50 million for security improvements after voters there approved a referendum this week. A student shot 13-year-old Ella Whistler and teacher Jason Seaman in May at Noblesville West Middle School. The money will be used to employ more school resource officers, safety staff, and mental health counseling staff, and to recruit and keep teachers. Voter turnout across the state far surpassed the last midterm election in 2014, when Indiana had the lowest turnout in the nation. Up to half of the polling places in Monroe County ran out of ballots at least once, and a judge ordered polls to remain open an extra hour because of the delays. Monroe County Clerk Nicole Brown says they planned for an uptick in the number of voters
but nowhere near the almost doubled voter participation rate.
And Barbara, what a crazy night. Some say, will we see Donnelly and Watson again? And at least our analysts that night on election night said they're sure they'll see them again. So here we go, right, for 2020.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and we're going to have a mayoral race here in Bloomington that we'll be keeping an eye on as well.
Barbara, thank you very much. Well, how many high school students can say they've worked on equipment that makes it onto a U.S. Navy ship? At least 6, thanks to a new manufacturing program at Lagodi School. The student-run business is still in its infancy, but school officials hope it'll eventually help grow Indiana's workforce.
Students at Lagodi Senior High School are learning how to use machine tools. For an hour every day, they work in the school's engineering lab. They're getting course credit and they'll earn a grade, but they're getting something else too, experience that could lead to a future career.
You turn the machine on, you check to make sure the emergency stop is still working. If not, you're not supposed to make a part. You reset and then you power up, restart.
The project is a student-run business called Lion Manufacturing. It's the brainchild of the School District and Regional Opportunity Initiatives, an Indiana nonprofit that awards grants to bolster workforce development in schools. Exposing students to manufacturing and STEM programs is one of the governor's top priorities. In this year's State of the State address, he called Indiana's workforce shortage the defining issue of the decade.
Right now, we have 85,000 jobs in Indiana unfilled because employers simply can't find the people equipped with the skills they need.
Today, Lion Manufacturing is just one machine, a dry erase board covered in numbers and some scattered materials and finished parts. Junior Sean Page is making an aluminum foot about 1 inch long that will eventually be used on a radar system on a U.S. Navy ship. It's a small piece of a big puzzle.
You're supposed to hand jog the vise to the center of the platform to where it's easier to reach in. It doesn't put too much weight on one side of the machine. Then you load a part, you tighten it down, you flatten it against the vise, you close the door, you hit start, and the final piece will look something like this.
Lion Manufacturing is based off of a similar program at a high school in Strum, Wisconsin. Students there worked with a local manufacturing company to make parts. Earlier this year, a team of people from Lagodi and Regional Opportunity Initiatives visited Strum to see if it was possible to replicate their program.
It was just like a light switch for me because I could just envision the possibilities of a program like this working at the high school.
Pam Lockmiller and her husband own Lockmiller Machine and Tool, a Lagodi manufacturing shop. Lockmiller worked with the school district to start Lion Manufacturing. In addition to advice and equipment, they lent one of their longtime employees, Mitchell Mathias, to the high school to get Lion Manufacturing up and running.
There was never anything like that while I was going through high school, so I'm kind of living vicariously through these kids. I want them to have the opportunity to see what there is out there, because I had no idea, going through high school, what I was going to do.
Lion Manufacturing will prepare students like Sean to pursue a college degree or enter the workforce straight out of high school.
But obviously the hope for us is that we are growing a new workforce.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Emma Atkinson.
Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk, we head to Butler Winery to see how the heavy rainfall has affected grape production in Indiana's growing wine market. And we look at a program for state prisons that helps inmates get good jobs when they get out, that also helps prevent them from ending up behind bars again. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
The WTIU WFIU news team connects Indiana to the world. We bring you the top news of the day on radio, TV, and online. We round up the stories that have people talking each week and dig deep into the issues that affect your community the most. The WTIU WFIU news team is where you are and telling your story.
In a time of change, where can you find in-depth reporting and thoughtful analysis? Washington Week on PBS. Join moderator Robert Costa.
When I was at the Capitol this week, I encountered the same.
And a panel of award-winning journalists.
You're seeing a divided nation, and you're seeing
for insights and perspective.
Tonight there was a key development in the
you
Senate.
Won't find anywhere else.
What a week.
Washington Week.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. Now, for headlines, we go over to Lindsay Wright, who has the latest on this week's top stories.
Thanks, Joe. Some Hoosiers are joining the national protest to call for the protection of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into potential coordination between Russia and President Donald Trump's campaign. Alex Eady reports.
This large group of people in Bloomington is worried about the future of an investigation into potential ties between Russia and President Donald Trump's campaign. They're one of several groups across the country participating in Nobody is Above the Law protests. The movement is a reaction to President Trump's decision to name Matthew Whitaker as acting attorney general after asking Sessions to resign. People fear it could compromise the investigation.
That's why the investigation needs to be running its course. We need to find out from professionals who are unbiased, not from people who are put into place by Trump for the very reason to do away with an investigation.
Bloomington Mayor John Hamilton also spoke at the protest, reminding attendees the power of the government starts with the people it represents.
We had a dramatic action taken by the President of the United States to threaten that accountability to the orderly process of law. And you know what we do when that happens? We show up.
And that's what these people plan to keep doing, regardless of how Trump responds. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Alex Eady.
7 IU freshmen are bringing a class action lawsuit against Indiana University over a mold infestation in 2 residence halls. The complaint alleges the university didn't respond to repeated requests to address the problem and refused to provide information about the nature of the mold or the steps to remediate it. IU officials say the university had more than 833 calls about mold and as of last week completed 826 initial inspections. The university has compensated affected students with $3,000 bursar credits. IU officials declined to comment on the pending litigation. The Indiana Commission to Combat Drug Abuse held a meeting in Indianapolis this week and says Indiana is making strides in the fight against opioid addiction. Indiana has stepped up opioid prevention efforts in recent years. Experts say hospitals are reporting fewer overdoses, and in some counties, overdose rates have declined.
I'm absolutely convinced that we're going to end this crisis, and we're going to do so in a lot less time than it took to create it.
The commission meeting also highlighted prescription drug take-back efforts and Recovery Works, a criminal justice system program. McClellan says there's still a lot of work to be done, and Joe, that is definitely true. More than 1,700 people died in the state in 2017 from overdoses.
Lindsay, thank you very much. After more than 2 years of delays, the Indiana Department of Transportation says I-69 Section 5 is nearly finished. But a lot of drivers don't see it that way. Lindsay Wright took a drive on the interstate this week to see for herself.
INDOT announced that I-69 Section 5 was substantially complete at the end of October. We drove that route today, and it doesn't seem all that complete. There are several times we were brought down to one lane. There are multiple speed limit signs. It's confusing, but INDOT says this is something that could go on through the end of November.
When we asked people whether they agree with INDOT that Section 5 is mostly complete, the answer is abundantly clear. INDOT officials said workers started removing barrels earlier this week, but as of Wednesday, barrels lined the entire stretch from Bloomington to Martinsville. INDOT says all lanes should generally be open, but workers will continue working on cleanup and final touches for the next several weeks.
We define substantial completion as the key elements of a roadway being complete and open to traffic with minimal disruptions to traffic, minimal lane restriction.
Permanent speed limit signs are up now, but work zone speed limits remain. And according to Manning, drivers still must follow those when flashing. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Lindsay Wright.
As Governor Eric Holcomb continues to focus on filling thousands of jobs in Indiana, he's looking to the state's prisons for help. During his State of the State address earlier this year, he said the state will graduate at least 1,000 inmates.
And we won't forget the 27,000 Hoosiers in our prison system. By 2020, we'll graduate at least 1,000 inmates annually in certificate programs that will lead to good jobs when they get out.
The Department of Correction is increasing its vocational training programs to align with those workforce development goals. As Barbara Brozier reports, it led the state to introduce 2 new programs in just the past year.
Stacy Jennings is typing what may look to many like a foreign language.
For me, it takes a little longer because I like to understand what I'm doing and why it's doing it.
She's working on her website, which will eventually include her portfolio and resume.
This is the CSS, the design part of it.
And she admits this isn't the path she initially pictured for herself.
I've always was involved in schooling, education, and things, but when I went home, I couldn't utilize it.
Jennings is incarcerated at the Indiana Women's Prison in Indianapolis. She's been in and out of the system for years, but says she's finally developing the skills she thinks will help keep her out.
For one, it will help you be employed and be able to support yourself financially, and that helps get you over some of the obstacles that you face when you go home and you're faced with all these obstacles, like how I'm going to live, how I'm going to survive, how I'm going to support myself.
This group of women makes up the inaugural class in Indiana's The Last Mile program, a 1-year course that teaches women how to code. The class meets for several hours every day.
There are 3 big technologies that the whole internet is based off of, and we teach them all of those 3.
The goal is to arm women with the skills needed to land a job as a computer programmer upon their release. And that has a direct impact on recidivism. According to the DOC, nearly 34% of offenders returned to prison within 3 years of their release date in 2017. But at other facilities with the Last Mile, there's a 0% recidivism rate among graduates, and 100% get a job or continue their education after their release.
Correctional education prepares you to enter the workforce, but once you get into the workforce and you get a job within 90 days after that, you retain employment, your recidivism rate, it's just a perfect alligator mouth. As your education goes up, your employment goes up, your employment goes up, your recidivism rates go down, down, down. They're linked together.
It's part of a shift toward more hands-on vocational training in Indiana prisons. A big change is the focus on career paths with national certifications like welding. Earlier this year, 10 women graduated from a new program at Madison Correctional Facility. They underwent 80 hours of hands-on training to obtain an American Welding Society certificate.
The employer knows what you know, knows your skill level, as opposed to you or the former offender, the released offender, sort of stating, well, I think I can do that.
And those types of programs can also help offenders stay out of trouble while they're still incarcerated. Emily Boyer says The Last Mile gives her a sense of pride she didn't have before.
Right now I'm working on a tic-tac-toe game, and you wouldn't think it would be that difficult because it's like click a button, but there's so much more that goes into it than that.
She still has a few years before she could be released, but Boyer hopes to move to a bigger city and get a job as a software engineer. She thinks being in a new environment, armed with new skills, will help ensure she doesn't end up here again.
I want to wake up and want to go to work. And so I think that's where I'm headed with it.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Barbara Brozier.
Vineyard workers across Indiana say heavy rainfall hasn't dampened their grape production. The growing season ended a few weeks ago. Heavier than normal rainfall like this year produced smaller yields when compared to last year's strong crop, but Butler Winery owner James Butler says even with the heavy rainfall, they had a good year.
Last year was almost perfect. We had just the heat we needed, just enough rain to get through the end of the season. We had a really big crop last year, probably our best ever. This year we wound up with a little smaller crop and a little more struggle with the rains. Wet, humid weather produces more mildews, and those are things that we don't like in the grapes. Pretty much across the board. I've talked to a couple people who had their biggest crop ever this year, and one fellow we buy from, quality's excellent. No problems as far as that goes. Overall, it was a good year. It was trying. You have to be more precise in the vineyard when you have wet conditions. We have to do leaf pulling, keep that canopy open so the fruit dries out. So that's the challenge in a wet season. But if you do that, things come out pretty well.
And that's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville Fiber, the Gigacity Company, fiber internet, HD, and digital IPTV in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Maller Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis, lawmg.com. The IU School of Education, preparing teachers, scholars, and administrators to improve teaching in Indiana and around the world. education.indiana.edu. IU Alumni Association, connecting IU's network of alumni and sharing the Indiana spirit through scholarships, advocacy, and volunteerism. alumni.iu.edu. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.